Throughout history, freethinkers have outraged the religious with their wacky ideas about the virtues of free speech, reason, and of course, eating babies. Now, God is dying, and it's time to dispose of his remains. From the pits of hell, Satan sends two puppets of the imperialist West and the Zionist Jews against God, Islam, and tiny kittens to bring you their propaganda and conspire for a new world order. This is Secular Jihadists for a Muslim Enlightenment with Ali Rizvi and Armin Navabi.
Welcome everybody to another episode of Secular Jihadists for a Muslim Enlightenment. My name is Ali Rizvi and I'm joined as always, almost always, by Armin Navabi, who works out. Armin Navabi works out.
This is not a thing, by the way.
Going?
You're pretending like I constantly talk about. I don't. When did I ever say that? Like I said it once, and you pretend. I
know.
Like, why?
But it's a good thing. I should be working out. Have you seen me?
But
have you seen? Well,
why are you making that a thing? That. Like, did I ever brag about it? I never bragged about it.
No.
Okay. All right.
No,
go on.
You didn't brag about it.
Okay. Go on.
You actually don't brag about much. That's the thing. We got to get you bragging more. Okay. So in any case, today we're going to be talking about the province of Quebec here in Canada, and Quebec has recently passed a ban on religious symbols. Those are like crosses and headscarves and kippas and all of that stuff. And this has been a controversial bill. It's called Bill 21, and we're going to hear more about it from the guests that we have today. And we are joined by David Rand. David Rand is the president of Atheist Freethinkers in Montreal, Quebec. He is a spokesperson for the Alliance for Secularism, which is a coalition of several Quebec organizations that promote secularism. He has written for Humanist Perspectives, Free Inquiry, Huffington Post Quebec, CBC News, I'm really bad at French pronunciation.
Raison.
La Raison. Okay, there you go. And several other outlets. He's also spoken at many atheist and secular events around the world, in Canada, Poland, the UK, Argentina, Chile, Lebanon, France, everywhere. So Atheist Freethinkers, which is his group, he's president of, supports Quebec's Bill 21, which partially implements state secularism. And he's going to join us to talk about it. This is a controversial bill that the Liberals have opposed. Many people have criticized it for something that is... They say that it's specifically targeted towards Muslim women. So a lot of people have called it Islamophobic and so on. So we're going to kind of drill down into this and get to the bottom of it, see what's in the bill and what it's really all about. So, David, first of all, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining us. And as an atheist and as a secularist, you don't have any dog in this race in terms of any kind of specific religion. So we thought, it's great to get your perspective on it. But can you explain, first of all, if whatever I missed at least, about what Bill 21 is, the history of it, how it came about, when it was passed, and so on? Okay,
I want to correct one thing you said, although what you said was correct, but you said Bill 21 puts a ban on religious symbols. True, but it puts a ban on religious symbols only in the public service for some employees while on the job. And not even all of them. Okay, and it's very important to say.
Right.
It's very important to specify, because people who oppose it tend to make blanket statements like, "Oh, you're banning all religious symbols." Well, where and when and how? So the details are very important.
So just to be clear, you mean that the religious symbols, if you're going out in public, go to the park, whatever, you can dress the way you want to, wear whatever you want.
Of course.
This is only in government.
It's only if you are a government employee, not a user of public services. Only if you're a government employee while you're on the job, and then you're in a position of authority, which includes police, judges, prison guards, and prosecutors, and teachers are included. Those employees are included only while they're on the job. And there's also a grandfather clause, so that people who are already working before the law was published last March, the draft bill, they can keep theirs. So I oppose that, but that's so. There's the law has a very narrow application. Also, it does restrict face coverings. And the ban on face coverings would apply, I believe, to all employees and also to anybody requesting services. They have to show their face to get services.
So just to be clear, if I'm going to school, if I'm a parent of a child, and go to the school, then I don't have to remove my hijab. I only have to remove it if I'm an employee of the school, if I'm a teacher there.
Only
correct?
if you're an employee and while you're on the job.
Got it. While you're on the job. So
that's the whole point. That's the whole point, is that in order to have a secular state, we do not want people who are agents of the state working for it to display partisan symbols. There's already a law on the books in Quebec, which has been there for years, which bans employees from wearing, from expressing partisan political views while they're on the job. And religious symbols are, this Bill 21 just extends this to religious symbols, although Bill 21 isn't as nearly wide-ranging as the existing law about political neutrality. The existing law for political views applies to the entire public service. There's no grandfather clause, and it even has some application off the job. Like I believe a civil servant could not run for public office. They could join a political party, but they couldn't run for public office while they're employed by the state. They'd have to quit their job, for example. So Bill 21 on religious symbols is much less restrictive than that.
But before we continue and go into details, I just want to point out to people that this is something that I've been to some events where you speak, right? And people very much within our own community, within the atheist community and within the secular community, a lot of them disagree with you and push back against you. And they say that this is too intolerant, and you know, why can't we just let people wear what they want? Why is the government telling people what to wear and what not to wear? You know, so we don't we don't, just like in Iran, when we don't support the government forcing people to wear hijab, we don't want the government in Canada to tell people that they can't wear the hijab. And also, so how do you respond? I have other questions, but again,
first of all, there's a whole slew of statements you made. For one thing, I think that any allegation of symmetry is just cruel and just ridiculous, as if there were symmetry between the ban in Quebec and the forced hijabbing, forced wearing of the hijab in say Iran or some other country. In there, you can get into serious trouble. You can be arrested. You can be thrown in prison, or worse, for not wearing the hijab in Iran. We're talking about a ban on people wearing religious symbols when they're on the job, and only some of them on the job. There's no comparison whatsoever. Also, it's true that in English-speaking environments, the majority of people freak out and they don't understand it. But if you go into a French-speaking environment, things tend to change incredibly. It's completely normal because there are similar bans in France. There are bans like this in Belgium and in parts of Switzerland and in Germany. There are also bans on face coverings in many countries in Europe and many countries in Africa, some of which are Muslim majority. And so banning religious symbols or face coverings are things that are commonplace, and in fact commonplace in a number of liberal democratic countries.
Right, well, in addition to that, actually, in France, there at the time that it happened, I mean, there were polls that showed that up to half of the Muslim population in France supported it. So that was
the point is, one of the things. Let me finish something. Okay, one of the reasons banning religious symbols is so important, and especially in schools, is not to necessarily to protect us from somebody else's religion. It's to protect children from the religion of their parents. That's really important, that children be able to go to school in an environment where there are no religious symbols being pushed down their throat by the teacher. And it's probably worse if it's the same religion as their parents.
By the way, just to make it clear, I'm just playing devil's advocate to our audience. Like, these are the things that I hear people push back. Like, I'm mostly in agreement with everything you're saying, but I just want to bring out these points, right? So how would you respond to people that say, like, you know, it's not really secularism? So first of all, you're saying, oh, the French people, it's normal there, there's support for it, but that doesn't make it right? So But isn't the point of secularism that the government stays away out of individuals' religious choices? So
Yes.
It's one thing for the government itself should not have any religious symbols in it. But if the individuals decide to have a personal religious symbol, then the government shouldn't tell them what to do and what not to do, because that's secularism. Secularism is
the government should tell them what to do because they're working for the government. Also, the reason I mention France and other countries in Europe is simply to respond to your assertion that most people are against this when you bring it up. And
I didn't say that.
Some cultures, yes, you did.
No, I said what I was saying is that when we go, like, you have to deal with a lot of pushback when you go. I was just talking about anecdotal.
Yes, I understand that.
I wasn't talking about majority. I wasn't saying majority are for or against it. I don't know the statistics.
No, that pushback doesn't justify being against it any more than the majority in France justifies being for it.
I wasn't making that argument that it does, though. But go on.
Well, you could have been. I wasn't making the opposite argument either. I wasn't making the. I wasn't saying numbers.
Okay. Go on. Yeah.
Numbers don't make it right. But there, when you made an argument a minute ago that when a symbol is on a installation, like on a wall or something, that's bad. But you got to allow people to wear what they want. Well, when an employee who's on the job, especially a teacher, is wearing a religious symbol, it is just as influential as a crucifix or any other symbol hanging on the wall. And in fact, I would argue it's more influential. I mean, the person who is working for the state is interacting with people, and they're the center of attention, especially a teacher. The symbols that they wear are just as influential and probably more so than anything that's hung on the wall. The children in school, they're looking at the teacher. They're not looking at the crucifix on the wall all day long. They're looking at the teacher. And so it's very important that the state employee not display religious symbols on the job.
So you're saying a police officer, if they want to wear the Sikh turban or a hijab, they can't. If they want to wear that on duty, they can't. They shouldn't be able. They should not be able.
They should not be able to. No.
Why?
Because they're indulging in religious advertising, which is a form of passive proselytization. They're showing themselves not to be neutral. Even if they're neutral in their mentality, even if they're very liberal-minded, it doesn't matter what's going on in their head. The point is they present an image which is attached to that religion, and many religions are very misogynistic, especially Islam, for example. Many religions are very homophobic. What would consider a young gay man or a young lesbian who interacts with a police officer because he or she was jaywalking or doing something that might be illegal, and they have to deal with an officer who's wearing a symbol of a very homophobic religion. They're not going to feel comfortable, and they have good reason not to feel comfortable. And the solution to that is very simple: just ban the religious symbols while people are working on the job.
Well, okay, but let's say a woman with a hijab. Let's say she is more likely to have a bias against members of the.
I'm not saying that.
No,
I'm not saying that.
I am saying that. It is more.
Okay, maybe she does. But it doesn't matter. I don't care what's in her head.
Actually, that's what I'm suggesting is that what is in her is if she takes off her hijab, her bias will still be there. The hijab is not like getting her to remove the hijab, for example, is not going to get rid of the bias, right? Isn't the bias the bigger deal?
Actually, there's an argument that it will. I mean, what the point is that if we make it socially acceptable and socially required that you take off your religious symbols when you go to work, in the public service, then people will understand, I have to be neutral when I'm on the job. That's part of my duties for this job. It's part of the job description. And the message will get through. And it will influence the behavior of the person. They will behave in a more neutral fashion.
Do you have like data? Like, is this proven or is this just a guess? What if it hide?
Why do I need data? No data is necessary. It's obvious that. Why do companies spend millions of dollars on advertising? Because it works. And when a person wears a religious symbol, it's a form of advertising. They're advertising their religion. It's passive proselytizing. And another. Oh, it slipped my mind. I had another point to make. I'll come back to.
I have a tip, by the way. I have like a screen here that I'm writing my notes so nothing slips my mind. So you could do that as well. But what if it, instead of removing the bias, it just hides the bias? And like now people are more afraid because they know, oh no, there's like these people in the bias, at least with the hijab or the religious symbols. I could be like asking for a.
So what are you saying? You're saying that people should be allowed to wear their religious symbols, like even cops, and so people who need a cop could go shopping for the right religion. Please send me a Sikh policeman because I don't like Christians. Please send me a Muslim policewoman because I don't like Hindus. I mean, it's ridiculous. You're not gonna. You either.
Is that ridiculous? Because, for example, in the United States, for example, they send black police officers to a black communities. Like they're trying to do that to have police officers that represents the community and people could relate to with a little more and like report crimes more because they see these police officers are black or something. Is that a bad, like, wouldn't you do if you have a Muslim community and if you send police officers that look Muslim, they have beards and they have hijabs, wouldn't that make it a more effective police force in that Muslim community? Again, I don't believe in what I just said. I'm just trying to
for reasons similar to why you don't want a woman wearing hijab teaching children, especially if those children have Muslim parents, because you want the children to go to a place where they're free of that. So a more universalist environment. And I just remember the point I wanted to make is that the state is not responsible for people's religious beliefs and practices. If a person wants to practice a religion where they have to wear, a colander on their head, or they have to go naked whenever the moon is full, or whatever it is, it's not up to the state to accommodate their belief. People are responsible for their own beliefs, and that's part of separation. The state is not responsible. If you have a belief, it's your problem, it's your responsibility. If it makes it hard to perform a certain job, that's your problem, and it's not the problem of the state, and the state has no responsibility to accommodate that person, because religious beliefs are not real. They're totally virtual. Whereas you mentioned race, and race is a real thing. And so are health concerns. For example, if a person has a real physical handicap and the state offers health services, well, then that physical handicap is something the state has to accommodate as part of health services, of course. But religious beliefs and practices are based on nothing but choice and taste and indoctrination. They're not real.
Would this would this apply to? Okay, go on, Ali. Sorry, you go.
No, I'm going to go ahead. One more.
Are you sure? Would this apply to political symbols? Like, say, should it up? I know it doesn't in this bill, but should it apply if people can't? If people advertising,
like I said, it already does. I said it already it's already there.
So for example, if I have a police officer and I say I'm a liberal, like have a liberal pen or a conservative pen while I'm duty, that's not allowed.
Of course not.
A pen on.
No,
put
pen.
it in your pin. Oh,
Yeah,
not
like
if it's on the outside of the uniform.
Oh.
I mean,
so that's not. So
imagine if a judge had, like, if you go into the thing and the judge has a Trump pin on, right?
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
Or a MAGA hat on their
so
head.
this is why, this is actually, to put the devil's advocate side of me away, this is why I really much support this, because it's very consistent. It's not just consistent. It's not
Gabriel's
just.
advocate.
It's not just consistent among all religions. It's consistent among all ideologies. Like, that's why I don't understand that's why I support this bill very much, right?
But Armin, I already said that there is a law in Quebec that does this for political symbols. Okay,
Yeah.
So that's already covered.
Good. Okay.
And
Yeah,
as it should.
It is.
And there are probably similar laws in other places.
Great.
Like Ali said, you can't have a judge wearing a partisan symbol while sitting on the bench, right?
Okay, I have more questions, but I'm going to let Ali.
Yeah, sure. But I actually want to move on to some of the more the mainstream discussions that are going on around this, and how we can sort of clarify some of those misconceptions. So the first one is, and then you sent me this article from the Humanist.com, is this idea that this is specifically targeted towards Islam and Muslim women and so on. And there was a really interesting passage in this where actually that's not true. It also applies to crosses and yarmulkes and the turbans and kippas and everything. And there was some opponents that argued when the measure was first proposed that it was hypocritical for the assembly to pass such a law when there was this huge crucifix that you said has been there since 1936 that hangs over the chamber, right?
Which is now gone.
And yeah, from 1936, as soon as this thing was passed, just a couple of weeks later, the next month, the crucifix was taken down. So
they promised to take it down if the law passed, and they did.
And they did.
Now, they should have taken it down years ago, but at least they finally did. You know.
Right. So yeah, I wanted to get sorry. Go ahead.
So what if people say, like, look, you're basically making it, given that we know a lot of Sikh men can't take off their turban, and they won't ever.
Yes, they can. Jagmeet
let me finish
Singh did.
Okay, but many of them won't. And given that many Muslim
that's
women,
their problem. The state is not.
Actually, I'm going to get to that.
But let me finish the question, and you guys can respond to it. And I know what your answer is going to be, and I agree with you. But I just make the point. And given that so many women, Muslim women, will not take off their hijab, you're effectively discriminating against qualified people. They could have been wonderful police officers or teachers or judges or whatever. Because of their religious belief, you're discriminating against them. You're excluding them from a workplace, even though they have all the qualifications for that job. You're discriminating against them because of their religious belief.
No, they're lacking one qualification. One qualification is that they have to take off their religious symbols on the job. That's a qualification of the job, and that is a major one. And if they're unwilling to do that, there's some kind of fanatic probably, or something's wrong. But the point is, they're responsible for their decision. If they decide they cannot take off their Sikh turban or their Islamic hijab or whatever, that's their decision, and they have to suffer the consequences, and the state has no responsibility for them being so pig-headed about a particular symbol that they should not be wearing on the job for reasons of religious neutrality. Okay. Also, the bill does not discriminate against any religion because it covers all religious symbols. It does not discriminate against women or men. There's an appearance. I say that Bill 21 discriminates against women who wear hijabs in the same way that speed limits discriminate against people with fast cars. In other words, if you have a fast car and you drive it fast, you're going to break a speed limit, and you're going to break the law. So the law will get after you. Well, I mean, currently, for example, we have political Islam, which is really pushing the hijab. They are on a worldwide campaign to normalize the hijab and to promote it and get as many people as possible to wear it. And it is a campaign against secularism. So, of course, there's going to be a lot of women, hijabi women, who are going to challenge this law. But to say that it's the religion that discriminates against women by forcing them to wear certain things, some religions, and it's these people who are wearing religious symbols who are self-selecting for discrimination in order to fight against secularism. This is the tactic in France. It's the tactic in Quebec. And when people, I think it's like really, really shows a total lack of intellectual acuity and a real intellectual sloth to fall for such an obvious argument. I mean, it's obvious that they will claim that we know that Islamists use the language of human rights in order to fight against human rights. They're promoting misogyny by saying they're defending women against discrimination. It is so hypocritical. It would be laughable if it were not so tragic.
So I wanted to move on, well said. I wanted to move on to something that just came out in the last 24 hours. That there are a whole bunch of civil rights groups that are planning to challenge this law, Bill 21. They want to take it to Canada's Supreme Court.
They're not beginning. They've been challenging it forever. Okay,
Forever,
we all knew it. Yes, we've known about this, and they've already gone through two levels of court. They've already gone through the Quebec Superior Court and the Quebec Court of Appeal, which is higher than the Superior Court, which is confusing. And they were, by the way, it's not a whole bunch of, I believe, it's basically one woman who's supported by two organizations, one of which is a very sort of fundamentalist Muslim organization, the Canadian Council of Muslims.
The
and
National
the
Council
other,
of Canadian Muslims. Yeah.
That's it. Thank you. That's the correct name. And the other one is the Canadian Civil Liberties Association. Right. And I think it's really shameful that they would be doing this. I'm really disgusted that they would be so duped by the strategy of Islamists that they would facilitate this undermining of secularism and undermining of human rights in the name of human rights. It's really disgusting and hypocritical for them to be doing that. They need to be condemned for such stupidity.
Okay. So what they're doing is that they put out the statement. I think they got a 2-1 decision from the Quebec Superior Court that said that the law should be allowed to stand until the challenges are heard in. Oh, sorry, the more junior court than the Quebec Superior Court. There was a 2-1 decision saying that the law should be allowed to stand until the challenges are heard in.
No, the first one they had a single. No, the first level was one judge who ruled against the suspension. Then the second level we just had with 3 judges, 2 of which said no to the suspension. Right. So both levels said no to suspending the law. So the law is still enforced. And now they're going to appeal to the Supreme Court of Canada. However, all this is separate from the challenge to the law itself. These are only to try to get an injunction to stop it immediately, but claiming that it'll cause immediate harm, so trying to stop it immediately by injunction. Whereas the underlying case of trying to get the law totally repealed, that will start next October, apparently. Next October,
okay. And the other thing that I wanted to say before we actually get into how this law came about and what the motivation for it was, because that's where a lot of the controversy lies, is that this idea of, I mean, when we had the debate, when we had the Canadian election, you had Jagmeet Singh. So Jagmeet Singh is, for the people who are outside of Canada, he is the leader of the NDP, the New Democrat Party, here in Canada. He is Sikh. He wears like a big turban. He's got a beard and so on. So this law would obviously, if he went to Quebec and he was a government employee, it would affect him directly. And Trudeau, both of them had this exchange on this, where both of them were opposed to the law. Jagmeet Singh for obvious reasons, but Jagmeet Singh was against federal intervention. He said that he wouldn't say that he would intervene to do anything about the law, whereas Trudeau was sort of equivocal on it and said that he would consider doing it. So so there's been a lot of controversy, and the reason there's controversy is because people think that this law was motivated by a sort of wanting to mount a reaction to the Islamists or the political Islamic community who is trying to do it. So, and you said that that was half true, right? Is that part of the reason that the
point? It's obvious that Islamists have the wind in their sails, and they're pushing hard to promote the hijab. And they've got a lot of so-called liberals and so-called leftists who are supporting them foolishly. And so it's inevitable that a law like this will affect them. But the point is, this type of secularism is what is current and accepted in the French-speaking world, and in Canada, the French-speaking world is mainly Quebec. That's where the most French speakers live. This law is very popular and among Quebecers, and having looked at both models of secularism, the one in the French-speaking world and the one in the English-speaking world, it's obvious to me that the one in the French tradition is superior. It's a better implementation, because in the English-speaking world, there isn't even separation. Even though people talk about it, they don't really apply it. And so in terms of, Quebec has passed this law, and it should be respected.
But what's your response to people that say this was not that big of an issue in Quebec with Christian and Sikh? This is a response to this is an anti-Muslim bill. That this is the whole other.
It's an anti-fanatic bill. It's an anti-fanatic bill.
Well, I mean,
it's an anti-fanatic bill.
Well, what? No.
Well, so what? Like I said.
No,
like I already said.
Okay, but let me you know my question because you know. Okay, you know my question because you have dealt with a lot of these things before.
I've heard it a million times.
But our audience might have not, so I'm just trying.
Accusation.
So let me just say that what the accusation is. The accusation is that you don't really care about Christianity, people wearing crosses or people wearing Sikh symbols. You only care about the hijab. You only care about Islam because you're a bunch of anti-Muslim bigots. That's the accusation, which I don't believe because that would be an accusation against me as well because I support this bill. You're just a bunch of anti-Muslim bigots, and you're just trying to be consistent with other religions just so that people don't call you out on your bigotry. Like you guys are against Muslim, you take the cross out, and you're against the Sikh turban as well, just because people to hide your anti-Muslim bigotry. But this was
there has been a secular movement in Quebec for decades, long before any threat from Islamists. Way back, there's been a secularization process that's been going on in Quebec since 1960, and there used to be crosses everywhere. There used to be crosses on all the walls and all the schools and all the hospitals. Most of them, unfortunately not all of them, have disappeared. Quebec has gone through a long process of secularization when almost all of that was getting rid of Catholicism, the symbols and influence of Catholicism in the public sphere. And it's only in recent years that Islam has arrived on the scene. And Sikhism is even less important. So secularists have been trying to get that goddamn crucifix out of the National Assembly for decades as well.
Right.
Finally, it's gone.
But what
furthermore, I want to talk about, because Ali mentioned Jagmeet Singh. You said that if he tried to get a civil service job in Quebec, he couldn't. False. All he'd have to do is take off his turban, and he's already done it for photo opportunities. As leader of the NDP, he's taken it off on occasion.
Wow, really?
Because they've asked him to do it, and because he's a good sport, so he took it off and said, "Here, he looks like a rock star from the 1960s or something, with his long black hair."
He's a good-looking guy, I gotta say.
Yeah, he is. But the point is, he's not going to be deprived of a job. He just has to take off the turban when he goes to work.
Right. So what do you say to people like, you secularists are a whole bunch of snowflakes? Really? A cross on a wall, is that what offends you? Who's that harming? Like a police officer showing? Why do you care what a person has on his head? Like really a piece of cloth around someone's head? Does that really offend you guys? You call other people that are snowflakes, but you yourself
I understand the accusation. May I answer before you go on?
Yeah. I'm really, really enjoying this.
No, it is because it's not a question. It's an accusation, and it's basically psychologizing the question. You're saying that a person cannot take a political position against the wearing of religious symbol. You can't sort of want religious neutrality in the public service. It's got to be some kind of psychological problem we all have. As a matter of fact, one of the judges in the latest court case, the one who voted to suspend the law, fortunately she was outvoted, she said that people who are against the law have visual allergies, like they're allergic to religious symbols. Once again, psychologizing as if it's a personal problem on the part of people who are against the law. The point is that symbols have meaning. Symbols have meaning. They are not innocuous. What would you think of a teacher who wore a MAGA hat all day long while teaching his or her class?
Or a KKK costume.
Teacher to take the stupid hat off when you go to work.
Yeah, well, it's just a hat, and it's just a red hat that says "Make America Great Again." Who could be against making America great again? It doesn't mean anything. Like, what's wrong with a hat? Like, that would be the accusation. It's
how about
like
a Nazi symbol?
That's what
how about a swastika?
No. I agree. I'm illustrating how ridiculous the argument is.
I've heard all these before, and they're all lame arguments. And
but what's the counter to? Okay, it's lame. What is the harm? Like, how do you? So yes, symbols have meaning.
The harm is that they normalize religion as being for one thing, they they amount to state endorsement of a religion, because if a person who's working for the state is wearing a religious symbol, especially if they're interacting with the public, especially if that public is children, if they're wearing a religious symbol, then that involves a sort of endorsement by the state of that religion. They're saying this religion is acceptable, and the state should not recognize any religion.
Yeah, and
Actually,
you're also opening the door. No,
Sorry?
but I also think that, symbols are just the knocking on the door for religion to get into the government, right? Because there's a line that you draw. This is what I say: the line that you draw. There's a government on the side, religion on the other side, and you don't let the religion pass this line. What I say is that if you pass this line a little bit, even if it's just a little bit, now you are already on the other side. This line becomes meaningless. Your wall has already broken down. So it doesn't matter if it's a little bit or if it's a lot. When religion is on the other side, now it has room to grow and infect the government. That's what I say.
Yeah, I think if there was somebody who's wearing like a Catholic priest uniform and they're teaching my kid science, or someone's got a big Star of David like pendant and a kippah, and they're teaching science, or they've got they're like Orthodox Jewish looking, I'd have an issue with that. I'm like, why is this person teaching my kid science? Like they're obviously biased.
But what if Ali? What if they had kept all their nonsense belief in Judaism, right? But they removed their religious symbols. Would you still not be concerned that they're teaching your kids?
I would, because I don't think that it would be as overt. I would still be concerned, but I can't read what's in their mind. If they're teaching them the wrong stuff, wouldn't the
religious symbol at least help you know that you need to take your children out of that class? Wouldn't the religious symbol in that situation be helpful to know that, okay, I need to take, like without the religious symbol now you don't know.
Now we're getting into like very sort of theoretical and hypothetical arguments. Yes, of course, like I would know, but like the idea is that let the teacher wear a KKK uniform, so at least I know they're racist, right? I mean, that's not the kind of thing I want. It's I don't want to send my kid to class saying, okay.
You realize how absurd the idea is. The point is, you guys, the symbol itself.
Yeah.
Wearing the symbol is a form of partisan behavior. Now they may have other forms of partisan behavior, and they need to be controlled too. So if they discriminate against students who are gay or of a certain race or whatever, then that's unacceptable as well, and that has to be dealt with. But wearing a religious symbol is unacceptable, and that has to be dealt with.
Right. You're selling something, right? You're selling something. It's
right.
Plugging, like if you come in wearing a shirt saying, okay, eat a Chick-fil-A or something like that, right? I mean, there's a lot of people would get people's opinions. People get upset about it. I mean, there's I think that you're right. Like I don't think that in the narrow application of the law, as you're saying, I think that it's completely reasonable, but I wanted to segue right now to something that you talked about earlier, and that is the French-speaking world and secularism in the French-speaking world versus the English-speaking world. So you have this concept of laïcité in France, right, which is a much more sort of stricter form of secularism than, say, the American version.
Well, it's more coherent too. It's more coherent.
Well, that's what I wanted to get to. So the American version is more sort of tolerant of religious freedom, because America is just generally more
an excess of tolerance is not a virtue.
Well, this is a question, because in the U.S., if you ask people, like when you poll people in France about whether they should ban the burqa, right? A majority of them say yes, you should. And you poll the U.S., should you ban the burqa? It's like 20%, because there are a lot of religious people who just they have a completely different view of it, the thinking about it. Is that because France is more of a nation state and the U.S. is a country of immigrants, where everybody came from a different background? They have more tolerance for it and more tolerance for religious freedom, or what is it? I'm actually torn between the two.
There are historical reasons to explain these things, but I mean, if you just look at the result, and look at which is better, I think it's obvious that you don't want religious symbols in
What is the result?
And the result being that it's considered normal that an employee of the state while they're on the job, or a teacher while they're on the job, they need to show religious neutrality, and that includes things that they wear, like nothing that displays a religious affiliation. And this is considered normal in France and to a lesser extent in Belgium and some other places in Europe.
What about a lack of affiliation, like an atheist symbol?
They would include atheist symbols as being something you should be discreet about on the job, and I would agree with them. In order to be equitable with everybody, take off your Christian symbol, take off your atheist symbol, take off your Muslim symbol. You can put it back on at the end of the day. Also, the legal systems are very different. In the United States, there's the First Amendment of the Constitution, which people claim implements separation, but it does not. The word separation is not there, and no synonym of separation is in the First Amendment of the American Constitution. All it says is that there's no state religion. It implements religious neutrality, but not separation. And another problem with that amendment is it says that freedom of religion cannot be limited, period. It gives absolute total freedom of religion, so you can't even limit it by some reasonable way. Whereas in French law, there's a law from 1905 that's called the Law of Separation of Church and State. That's the title of it, separation. And in the Declaration of Human Rights that was adopted in 1789 at the beginning of the French Revolution, they said people should not be bothered for their religious opinions, but within the limits set by law. In other words, it's possible to put limitations on freedom by law, and that is a good thing, because no freedom, no right should be absolute, because one person's rights end where another person's begins. Right. So nothing should be absolute.
I disagree a little bit with you on this. So I think that I would be a little bit more charitable to the U.S. view than that. So the U.S. First of all, the First Amendment does state that there will be no establishment, no, the state will not establish a religion, right? So there'll be no state establishment of a religion, which I mean, it doesn't say separation, the word separation, but that it essentially states the same thing, right?
And what it's not implied. No, it's not implied. Jefferson used the word separation in his commentary on it, and also I think that the jurisprudence is more advanced than the First Amendment, and that the jurisprudence has implemented some degree of separation. So yes, there is some degree of separation, but in the First Amendment, it's not there.
Okay. Secondly,
Jefferson's tafsir is like the Constitution is the Quran, and Jefferson's commentary on it is the tafsir. But
I'd also because we had Andrew Seidel here on the show, and we talked about this quite a bit too. So I'd recommend to get another side of this. I mean, listeners can listen to that episode as well. The second thing is that when it comes to this is for me sometimes the conflict is that there's two values, right? One is free expression, of which religious expression is a part, like freedom of religion, is a part of free expression, free speech, freedom of your thing, and the other is this idea of separation of religion and state, which is also really important. So I think that what the Quebec's Bill C-21, right?
Bill 21.
Bill 21, sorry. Yes. C-21, I'm getting it.
C is for Canada, for federal, I think.
That's right. So Bill 21, I think that is compatible with the U.S. version of secularism as well. And in a lot of cases, it does happen because, I mean, we also had David Silverman here, he's the executive director of Atheist Alliance International, and he used to be the president of American Atheists. And they did a lot of campaigns where they had the Ten Commandments removed from government buildings. They had sort of religious symbols, Stars of David and crosses and everything like that removed from places. So, they didn't go all the way, but they fought against the Pledge of Allegiance having under God, or
Yes, I'm familiar with that some progress has been made. I'm familiar with that, but I'm saying that constitutionally, the United States is not secular, and there's a lot of pro-religious prejudice. which is compatible with that vision of religion, and that freedom of religion has no constraint in that First Amendment. Well, and there should be freedom of religion should not be balanced with secularism. Freedom of religion should be balanced with freedom from religion. And they are both part of what secularism is designed to protect. It's to protect people's right to practice their religion or not be forced to practice a religion or have a religion forced on them. That's what secularism should be. Freedom from religion has to be there.
Secularism is not like a binary thing either. Some countries, I think it's like a spectrum. Some countries are more secular than the other, right? So, like United States is secular relative to Iran, maybe not so secular.
For sure.
Relative to France, not so. Even relative to some other less.
It's more secular than Canada.
And it's more secular. It's more secular than Israel, for example. Even though Israel is more secular than Iran, and United States is more secular than Israel. But I'm just saying, it's not like we can't say, okay. Well, I have a question though. Like going to the extreme other side, devil's advocate, why not private? Why is this just for government jobs? Why can't private companies have this policy?
Well, I think they could, but this would have to be. There would have to be. I mean, what's most important is that the state be secular, because that's what people in general interact with for government services, and that's the central part, and that's really important. There are companies. I think a company should be able to adopt a secular policy, but there would have to be legislation from the state which would frame it to make sure that it applies to all religion and it doesn't discriminate on the basis of religion, and it's fair. And apparently there are some companies. I heard of a case I think it was in Belgium, where a woman was fired from a receptionist job because she wore a hijab, and the company was a private company, and they had a secular policy. And the court looked at the case and they ruled against the woman because they recognized that the company had a secular policy in place that it applied to all religions. They didn't just invent it at the last minute to get rid of her. Mm-hmm. It's something that was in place to prevent religious symbols across the board. And she violated this pre-existing policy, and so she lost her case. So I think that private corporations should be able to do this, but they would have to be controlled so they remain fair.
Another question is, in Iran, back before the revolution, the Reza Shah banned hijab in public, not in government jobs, but in public places, right? So
that's really radical. That's really over the top.
So you can't wear, and nobody could have wear hijab in Iran unless they were in private. So it was banned in public, and you think that's way too extreme?
That sounds extreme. I mean, I suppose if you're dealing with really extreme conditions where all women were forced to wear the hijab for years and they wanted to get rid of it fast, I don't know, maybe they could justify it, but it sounds like a really extremist position to me. Yeah. And I think that I would support the possibility of banning face coverings like the niqab and the burqa in public. That's a possibility that I don't know if it's necessary, say in Canada or United States, but I think it's something to be envisioned, and I think it's justifiable.
So I think that I just want to kind of again reiterate how important this is. That this is the Bill 21 itself is very narrow in application.
Yes,
only for the employees.
Should it be this narrow though? Why can't it be less narrow? Why can't it be?
Armin, 1 second. It's only just 1 second. Let me just finish what I'm saying. Okay. So it's narrow. It's only restricted to employees. When you talk about the burqa and the face veil and the ban, and for something like Armin is saying, why can't it be less narrow and so on? There are people who argue that. They say that why can't we have a burqa ban across the country? Because it's not what our identity is. It's a security issue. It covers up the women. It's oppressive to them, and so on.
Not a burqa ban, a hijab ban.
No, but I'm talking about the burqa as an example.
He's talking about the burqa.
I'm talking about the burqa. Right. But when they talk about it, the moment you ask them, what about a childhood circumcision ban? Like if there's perfectly healthy.
Yes. That's a good thing.
Why are you arguing for a burqa ban? And I've met people who are for the burqa ban who are almost universally against the circumcising babies against their will. Because even though that is a much more irreversible change.
Yes.
And that is you're violating the autonomy of
that's
a
a
child.
very good point. If you are if you are for banning the hijab for children, but you're not against banning circumcision, then you're being a hypocrite.
You're a hypocrite.
Exactly. Yes. But actually, I think that banning even hijab should be the hijab even should be banned for children in schools.
Yes.
I think that banning. I think that veiling children for long periods of time, like for weeks and months or years, it's a form of child abuse and should be defined as child abuse. And I don't know if it should be criminalized, but at least should be banned in schools so that nobody can force their child. Probably in general, yes, but at least in schools is an excellent start. I consider that similar to circumcision or FGM, although FGM is far worse than male circumcision, of course.
Well, not really, actually. Again, we had. I'll send you a link to our discussion with Brian Earp, right? And he's. You really have to listen to that. And he talks about why they're different. Even Ion. Yeah. Anyway, that's a different conversation.
Okay, that's
Let's
a
not
different
go into
conversation.
that.
But here's another devil's advocate that I think I've heard both Sarah Haider and Abdullah Samir bring this up. I don't know if this is their position now. I don't know if I'm representing the position accurately, so check with them. But they are suggesting that these kind of laws alienates these, for example, religious Muslims, and makes it difficult for them to integrate into society and become move away from fundamentalists. We're basically pushing them towards the fundamentalists and making them double down on their beliefs more. How do you respond to that?
My answer is that if you allow teachers to wear religious symbols, you're forcing fundamentalism on the children. And if you have teachers who are wearing hijab and there are children of Muslim parents in the class, then you're pushing fundamentalism onto the children. And the way not to do that is to get rid of religious symbols.
You're doubling down. You're doubling down, because the thing is, if you have a kid who's wearing the hijab at home and they're doing all that stuff, and then they come to the school and then they see that, okay, not only at home is this happening, but I'm in an open society and I'm going to school and my teacher's wearing the same thing. I mean, that is just disturbing. I have no.
Yes.
If somebody wants to wear the hijab, again, nobody here is against that. You wear it. It's your choice. It's your religious choice. I'm not in favor of people saying, okay, it's not a real choice. It is your choice. Like, a bad choice is still your choice. But when you're indoctrinating kids with these kinds of things, you're a hijab. People don't understand that it's an identity. When you wear the hijab and you meet somebody, you're telling them essentially, the first thing I want you to think of me is that I'm Muslim. That's the first thing.
And it's more than identity. It's also a symbol of purity culture. And,
That's a good point.
Which even rape culture would not be an exaggeration to say. I mean, the purpose of the hijab, the purpose of the hijab is to show that women who do not wear it, especially Muslim women who do not wear it, are impure.
They're asking for it. Yeah, not impure, but they're also asking for it because
that's putting it the same thing more crudely. But
just to clarify how narrow or wide this bill is, if you're working for the government but you're an accountant and you wear the hijab, you don't have any position of authority. You're not out in the open.
It only applies to people in positions of authority. Coercive authority. And teachers. In other words, coercive authority, that's judges, police, prison guards, and prosecutors.
So you could be a government employee.
Teachers, and school principals. And also there's the grandfather clause.
So you could also. Oh, okay. So you could be a government employee that wears the hijab, and that's fine because you're an accountant and you don't have any position. Oh, okay.
Now, in my opinion, to be consistent, they should ban them for all civil servants, and they should get rid of the grandfather clause. That's not what this law does.
Why?
There was a law proposed several years ago which would have done that, but the government that proposed it was defeated before they could pass it.
But what's the harm if they're sitting in the office and just typing on Excel spreadsheets? Why do they have to take off their hijab?
It's not as bad as, say, a cop or something, but I think to be consistent, you're on the job working for the state. You leave your silly silly beanie at home, or whatever it is.
One thing I want you to bring
T-shirt with I love Godzilla. No, Godzilla's not a god. Okay,
that's so random. I love it. I love Godzilla. hey, David, can we ask you something else? Since we have 6 minutes, and after that we're going to go to patron questions.
I have a question too.
There are blasphemy laws that are still on in Canada, right? Canada, there's still
no. The blasphemy law was repealed 3 or 4 years ago, but a motion against Islamophobia was adopted, which fortunately does not have force of law, but it's a really bad sign.
So 3 or 4 years ago, the blasphemy law was taken off the books.
Yes, it was paragraph 296 of the Criminal Code.
296. Okay,
however,
so the motion on Islamophobia, the M104, I also actually wanted to ask you about that. So I actually went to Parliament, and I was one of the witnesses in that.
Yes, in the report.
In the report, yes. So
yes, you're one of the people who said something intelligent.
Oh, thank you very much. No, but that made a difference. I was because when I read the report, I saw that the title of it still had the Islamophobia in it, but in the end, they only had like one chapter on the Islamophobia thing. A large amount of it was quotes from me, quotes from Yasmin Mohammed, who also testified against it, and the rest of the report was just about sort of like implicit bias training and racism and so on.
But it's what maybe wasn't as bad as you feared, but it was bad because it confuses race and religion all through it.
Absolutely,
it's really bad. It's really bad.
That's a point I made there, and that's why I'm glad that my point and a lot of my quotes actually made it into the final report.
Nice.
But I gotta so one
ask
of the things about this.
Because I have a question too.
Yeah, so it's a motion 104. How dangerous is that as a motion? Is it something that could turn
103.
103. Oh Jesus, I should know this. How dangerous is it if it's just a motion? Is there a chance of it becoming a bill, especially since I think made it a lot more equivocal down the drain?
I think as a motion, it does not have force of law, and its danger is at this point is mainly symbolic, and that is not to be sneezed at. It's not non-negligible. It encourages. It does not constitute legal censorship, but it encourages social censorship. In other words, it says that Islamophobia is bad. It's just like racism, and you shouldn't do it. And this is really bad. It sends a really bad signal to social media and to society in general. So it does not have force of law. So it doesn't mean that the government can start breathing down your neck to right away. But it does mean that it encourages everybody else to breathe down your neck. Including jerks on social media who start throwing around accusations of Islamophobia and xenophobia and all those stupid accusations we're also familiar with, and so it is dangerous nevertheless.
So before I ask a question, I just want to point out that what I actually feel about these kind of requests that human rights, lack of discrimination, let people wear what they want. This is not about people asking for their rights at all. This is people asking for certain privileges that other people don't enjoy, and you're basically saying that all sort of bias is not tolerated unless there is some divine source of authority. Basically, the government is recognizing a divine authority that gives some some biases or makes some biases acceptable and not other biases acceptable. So this is basically a government's recognition of divine authority, which is absolutely ridiculous. But my question,
you're so right.
my question that I want is that the rest of Canada seems to be treating Quebec like Quebec is the source of bigotry, and is this something that you notice that the rest
I certainly have noticed.
Yeah, so
please, I want you to read my most recent blog, whose title is, I really must tell you this, whose title is The 3 Pillars of Anti-Secularism in Canada. And the third pillar is anti-Quebecois racism. I'm convinced, and I say that I have been reluctant for a long time to actually use that language because the word racism has been so abused by anti-secularists and regressive leftists and all those crazies out there. But if the shoe fits, wear it. If it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck and looks like a duck, it's a duck, and it certainly looks like racism. And there's a long history of the anti-cable car racism in Canada. It's part of it's one of the things that makes Canada Canada. It's a part of our history, and it's being recycled in the cause of anti-secularism. Now there are that's only the third pillar. The other two are very important. The first. So
you're saying that the English part of Canada is racist against the French part of Canada?
I'm saying that's one part that explains a lot of the vituperation, the intensity, the hysterical opposition to Bill 21. It's like it's horribly evil. There's a real level of hatred against Quebec based, and Bill 21 is the excuse for it, or the cause of it. I'm not sure which.
Well, as somebody that lived in Vancouver and listened to Vancouver radio for a while and a podcast from Vancouver and stuff, I could tell you they do speak about people from Quebec as like a whole bunch of big, like they do treat them like, what the hell's wrong with Quebec? Like people in Vancouver. Exactly. Yeah. Yes. So they do treat them as like, oh, that's our bigoted part of Canada. Like as if they're all people there are racist or something.
Whereas they should be looking in a mirror to see the bigoted part of Canada.
Yeah. Okay. I gotta say though, I think I don't know any French, so when I get Quebec, I get some heat for that, and that's sometimes there's a little bit of tension there, but it's all friendly.
Let's go to the Patreon.
I have a question. Well, I mean, there's another thing. While you're on this Quebec topic, one of the people responded to the tweet. Okay, so this is from Gilbro 2010. When I posted that we're going to be talking about this, Quebec's ban on religious symbols, etc. He said, "I hope you know the history of Quebec before judging." So. What do you have any idea what he means by that?
Well, I think we touched on that, yeah.
Or can you touch on the history of Quebec, or just generally?
Well, I'm not sure which aspect of the history. I mean, Quebec was New France, and it was conquered by England, but that's like 250 years ago. There was a secular movement in Quebec in the 1830s, roughly. The Patriots, who tried to overthrow the government, which was the colonial government, and establish some kind of secular state. That failed, and they were many of them were hung, or others were exiled. Until about 1960, from the 1930s to the end of the 60s, Quebec was very much under the hand of the Catholic Church. It was very tightly controlled by the Catholic Church, and the government was tightly allied with several governments. The government of Maurice Duplessis was tightly allied with the Catholic Church, and Duplessis was the guy who put that cross in the National Assembly in 1936, and it was a symbol of the alliance of the government with the Catholic Church. And it's ridiculous that it took this long to take it down, but finally it's down. Anyway, when he died in, I think, 1959 or 1960, and there was a big change that started in Quebec, and Quebec started to secularize. The school system became secularized much more than it had been. It had been totally controlled by the church previously. The crucifixes that are all over the place started to come down. There were many nuns who were teachers who accepted that it was time to secularize. It was like everybody was sort of, this is what we're doing now, and they accepted to remove their habits and to dress like ordinary lay people, and
that's good.
They embarked as well in this project of making Quebec modern and secular. And this is also when the Quebec independence movement grew, became very important, and there's a political party. We know the history. So that's a short version of that. But that's a very short version.
Yeah, Ali, I just want to point out that one thing we did wrong the last episode that we had, one of our patrons left a comment on a post on Patreon that said that, oh, I'm not going to be able to be live, but this is a question I have, and we didn't see that question and we didn't ask this question. So can you take this responsibility that you actually, before the episode, you actually go and see if anybody that can't make it live, any of our patrons have left a comment that wanted questions. By the way, if you want to send us your questions, you send this to us on Patreon, because this is the question should only come from patrons when we're live. Okay, Ali? Because that's okay. And another reminder to everybody that once we reach 500 patrons, we're going to be translating a lot of our episodes to Arabic, Persian, Urdu, Malay. So please consider becoming a Patreon. Yeah. The ones that we think is more important for those people to, I think we had an episode on the Quran and one episode on Muhammad. I think those are going to be the first episodes that we're going to start translating and then keep going. Yeah. But we have to reach 500. How many are we right now? 320 something? Yeah.
27 or something like that.
27. Yeah. So if we reach 500,
we're getting there.
Yeah, we're getting there. Then we're going to start translating our shows. Okay. Anyways, let's get to Patreon questions.
Okay, let's do it now. So we have a little bit of time. First of all, you're getting compliments on your glasses, Armin. So
thank you.
Nice glasses. Someone is saying that you're trying to be like me. Are you competing with Ali Rizvi?
Yes.
And I said I'm not going to do that. Not until I start working out as well. It's not going to be even. But in any case, so we have Ed Ammon. He's asking that one of the questions already answered. So he's asking, what is a possibility of this law being debated in other states of Canada? So I guess he means provinces. I mean, we've got it in Quebec, but what about Ontario? We talked briefly about that, but do you think that something like this will get picked up in places like Ontario or BC or?
Short answer is no, not a chance. In the short term, no way. The opposition of all the political parties outside Quebec is just over the top. Provinces and cities have been passing resolutions against Bill 21 as if, like most legislation they don't give a damn about, but this law, they're passing resolutions against it. And it's just a level of hysteria that's it's just extreme. And so there's not a chance in hell in the short term that anything similar would be adopted in any other province. And they're doing everything in their power to kill it in Quebec.
Wow.
Right. Okay. So I have another question that's sort of related. So one of the arguments here in Ontario, and this is kind of, I somewhat agree with it, is that in Canada in general, the Islamist thread, as you were calling it, has not been the way it's been in France or in the UK or even in the US. So we've had overall the Quebec city shooting, the shooting at the mosque, where the guy went and killed 6 Muslim people. So that had a bigger toll than all of the other sort of Islamic terrorist attacks throughout the history of Canada, which you had an attack in Parliament, you had a couple of things, you had a couple of foiled plots. So one of their arguments is that, well, Quebec also has a lot of sort of anti-Muslim sentiment, and you had the Quebec mosque shooting, and they're banning the people wearing hijabs and all of this stuff. But the rest of us, we don't have that problem. So there must be something that's related in Quebec when it comes to that.
What they have outside Quebec is political leaders and media who are unanimous in their opposition to secularism, and who will not allow any kind of debate, any kind of questioning of it's what they call in French la pensée unique, the unique thought, the one party line. As it turns out, a recent poll showed that 38% of Canadians outside Quebec are in favor of a ban on religious symbols, such as Bill 21 does. And if you put Quebec back into the mix, it goes up to about 45%. In Quebec alone, it's like 70% or something. So there's a lot of Canadians, not the majority, 38%, pretty large minority, who would be in favor, but their opinion cannot be expressed, because as soon as they express it, they'll get dumped on, as you know. Furthermore, I would like to point out the conditions under which the mosque shooting in Quebec City, that was a huge gift for political Islam. They're the ones who profited from it. If they'd done it themselves, it couldn't have been done better. They started proposing a day of an official day against Islamophobia, which almost got through. Fortunately, it did not.
Wow.
M103 was triggered by it too. Yeah.
Yes, 103 was triggered, and this act of desperation, it occurred in a period when the first charter of secularism had been defeated in 2014. And it was a government of the Liberal Party of Quebec, which is viciously anti-secular and basically takes the attitude that you've been talking about of, Quebecers are all bigots and racists and Islamophobic and blah, 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 blah. And this guy, this Alexandre Bissonnette, he's somebody he'd been bullied all his short life, very mentally unhealthy, and he was afraid of Muslims, and he did this act. We don't know the details because there was no trial, because he pleaded guilty, and that shut down any discussion. But
that's the accusation.
Sorry?
Well, I mean, they're all mentally unhealthy. I mean,
yes.
These are all ideologically motivated things. But to me, it seems like...
No, I don't think there was a lot of idea. No, and he was not. I have heard people call him a white supremacist, and that's a crock of bovine excrement. He was not a white supremacist.
He said that he was influenced. His main thing was when Marine Le Pen came and did its speech, he was very, very taken by her ideas, and he was also very taken by a lot of Trumpian rhetoric.
Supremacist? I don't know. Did she express white supremacy?
She's not. Well, not.
No, we disagree. Ali, come on, we don't agree with her at all. But she's not. I mean, I don't know, but she's not a white supremacist.
The point is, white supremacism is mainly an American phenomenon, and it's and one of the reasons that. White supremacism has been greatly exaggerated because Americans force their point of view on the entire planet, and so it's a big problem in the United States. So it's got to be a big problem. I've heard people say that Bissonnette.
Yeah, I wouldn't say white supremacist. And that is
even far right people
I would say
are
like
not
an one of those sort of anti-immigrant, xenophobic. I would say that, not necessarily white supremacist.
Yeah.
So
he wasn't even xenophobic. He was afraid of Muslims, in particular. And he could see that the government was doing nothing. One of the reasons that Bill 21 is good is that it shows that the government is responding to a need, and that is to reassure the population that it's going to try to keep religious influence out of the state, and that's good, and that should help reduce the threat of violence by people who are mentally unstable.
Where I think that this works, I think it works. When you frame it as, you're an avid secularist, as am I, as is Armin, and what we did was, for the longest time, we've tried to keep the church and the state separate, okay? We've tried to make sure that distinction is maintained, and we've been very, very passionate and aggressive about it. And now, when we're seeing the same sort of challenges from Islam, we're not going to have a double standard about it. If it's the same kind of idea, same things happening, we're gonna do the same thing.
Ali, we really need to get to the patron questions without going on tangent on other things.
Next patron question is, what is the effect of blasphemy laws on this bill? This is from Matt Rose. So he's saying like Islamic blasphemy laws.
There's there's nothing direct at all, or even indirectly. I see no interaction between them.
Okay.
I mean, the only possible interaction is that by keeping all religious symbols out of the state, you're sort of minimizing religious influence in general, so people won't think of blasphemy. But that's really really vague. That's very vague.
Okay, so Ed Ammon is another thing for you, Armin. He's saying, who needs another debate guy when you have Barrister Armin, the ultimate devil's advocate? And I would take that as a compliment. I think that's great because we wanted, one of the things that I think we do well on this podcast, especially thanks to Armin, is that there's a lot of times people say, well, no, this is a counter argument, and they're frustrated. But Armin provides most, if not all, of the counter arguments to a point, even if we agree with it, so that there's more of a comprehensive discussion over here.
Thank you.
So we try to do that very deliberately. So the next question is from Ed. He's saying, the Pakistani constitution bans any Islamic symbolism by Ahmadi Muslims. Was that whataboutism, or is it a valid point to tackle arguments?
That's not secularism. That's just one religion. Then that's
religious bigotry. That's religious bigotry. Yeah. It's incredible that they are so they hate Ahmadis so much. They even put it in the Constitution that they can't call themselves Muslims. It's incredible.
Passport applications, national ID applications. It's all over there. You have to declare that they're non-Muslims. So it's ridiculous.
Just to simplify for people, if the government is against all symbols, religious symbols, that is part of secularism. But if it's against some religious symbols, that's the exact opposite of secularism, because now the government
it's bad secularism.
No, it's not bad. It's not just bad secularism. It's the opposite of secularism, because now you're picking. Now the government is picking and choosing which religions are acceptable, which is you're even getting more mixed with religion than if you didn't do anything at all.
That's true. Yeah, you're right. Yes. Yeah. It's because the government shouldn't have to decide what's a good religion and a bad one, or is this true Islam or not true Islam, or which is what the Pakistanis are doing,
exactly.
Or is this part of Christianity or not? No, all religions are.
Yeah,
they should have as much freedom as possible outside the state, and very little.
The government shouldn't get involved in theological arguments over what's
I was going to push even further and say that is actually a sign of theocracy, because when I grew up in Saudi Arabia, you could wear all the Muslim symbols you wanted to, but the thing is, you couldn't wear a cross. You couldn't even have like red on Valentine's Day. You couldn't have the Star of David. They used to cut off tips of snowflakes we made in class, like out of paper, just because it had 6 points like the Star of David. So yeah, that's actually a sign of theocracy. It has to be equal opportunity. Then we have Matt is asking, how could we pass this law in other countries?
By changing your government.
I wish I knew.
Please, if you could answer that, then that's amazing. Like, you tell us.
He's also saying, what should the rest of the world do to encourage the government on applying this type of bill?
Change
the... Well, I mean, the thing is, you have grassroots movements, right? You have things like that to lobby for.
I know. I have a good answer. I have a good answer. You support activism. For example, you can support this show. You could become a patron and support your other favorite secular activists, and that's how you make change.
Yes, good one, nevertheless.
That's
what is the question? Yeah. How can you get this passed in other jurisdictions?
In other countries.
Yeah, in other countries.
Right. Well, I think what you need to do is study, encourage people to study secularism historically, and to study its various implementations. I have taken a look at how it's evolved in English-speaking countries and French-speaking countries to some extent, and that really sheds a lot of light on the whole question. And so, if people were try to read up on, to educate themselves about secularism and the various definitions of it, and the history of it, I think that would help. That would inform them.
This is why before we went live, I was asking you if we could come on Atheist Republic, where we could discuss the history and different versions of secularism on a show on Atheist Republic. So so we could summarize that for people on a YouTube. On Atheist Republic's YouTube channel.
I think that would be good too. Okay, anyway, we're going to move on.
Last question.
So Ed has actually a really good question. Do you think people in their heart of hearts believe this is a good rule, but then to appear virtuous to others, they are compelled to argue against it? I have seen that a lot, actually, especially in Ontario.
Sorry, the sound cut out. A lot of people in their heart of hearts, they really think what?
Like, there are people who actually in their heart of hearts, they like this rule, but publicly they're afraid to kind of say it because they want to appear more.
Of course, like I said, 38% of Canadians outside Quebec are in favor of it, but very few of them are speaking up, except maybe in the comment section of some newspapers or whatever, because they're afraid to, because there is so much hysterical opposition.
Accusations of bigotry.
And it's a quality of the opposition as well, not just a quantity. Like, the people turn around, they'll immediately call you an Islamophobe or a bigot or racist.
Yeah,
you write about it, you could get fired from your job, and that's a big problem. So that's a big
it's horrible.
Can I get you before we go off? Can I get your confirmation that we will have that episode on the history? Because I'm very interested in getting educated and educating other people on the difference between secularism in North America and laïcité and all of that, and the history of
Putting
it.
him on the spot live. He can't say no now.
No, can you?
Are you asking me?
Yeah. Can you commit to that?
Yes. The answer is yes.
Okay, great.
Okay, good.
Fantastic.
You got lucky. Okay, so just a couple more.
There's no more question. That was the last question.
Yeah. So everybody become a patron.
Become a patron.
Sign up for it. It's really good.
500
if
was
you're
such
listening, if you're listening to this on your iTunes or your podcast app, you can actually watch this video. You can get in. You can ask questions. It's very, very different. It'll cost you as little as $1 a month. You can actually do that. So and it really is worth it. So do that for sure.
There were no obnoxious questions at all?
No. Well, really? Michael is saying there is a point of contention here. Michael is saying if Le Pen is not a white supremacist, I don't know who is.
Well, maybe she is. I'm badly informed. I don't know, but she's a right winger. But
I don't know if she. Yeah, I don't know if she is as well. I'm just saying that people we should be careful. She might be, okay, I don't know, but I'm just saying that people shouldn't just assume that it's somebody that even if they're far right, even if they're extreme far right, that doesn't necessarily make them a white supremacist. I mean, if
exactly, yes. We don't.
I'm not
white supremacists and.
Yeah, we're not saying she's not, but we're saying if somebody is suggesting that she's a white supremacist just because she's far right, that's the wrong conclusion. If you actually say that she's a white supremacist because she said this, and that's actually a statement that shows that she's a white supremacist, then we agree with you. But if we're making that, we don't know.
Yeah,
we're just making that argument. Okay.
Mike. What I would say is, she is anti-Muslim from what I know of her. She's definitely xenophobic, sort of French nationalist, and a lot of that can get conflated with the white nationalism thing, which is conflated with white supremacy and so on. So I understand why people think that.
People don't understand what white supremacist is, because even the Nazis let me just get controversial. Even the Nazis were not white supremacists. They were Aryan supremacists. Nazis were not white supremacists. Nazis saw other white people that were not Aryan as inferior to the Aryan race. So, most people... What? No, but
they were.
No, like the Nazis, they killed more white people than anybody else. They killed Russians, right? So, and a lot of white people. But they
hated Slavs.
They hated Slavs. They saw French and Spanish people who are also white as inferior to the Aryan race. So I just think a lot of people, when they just say white supremacists, when we say somebody is not a white supremacist, we're not defending them. Okay, just like when I say Nazis are not white supremacists, I'm not defending Nazis. I'm just being accurate.
You're just trying to be accurate.
Accurate with my terminology. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And now, as to how relevant that is in this day and age, that's different. But it is good to be accurate, and it's good to be aware of these things. In any case, that's it. David, thank you so much for joining us, man. That was really, really informative, and it was very helpful. I was actually equivocal about Bill 21. I'd heard what, I generally lean liberal, so I'd heard what some of the talking points were there. I was still sort of conflicted about it because I do hold a lot of the same feelings about secularism that you do, but I think that the way that you made your case, it made me see, especially the fact that this is a narrow application of the bill, and what it does, I think, is very similar to the kind of things that Dave Silverman and American Atheists and all this.
Actually, me too. Because I consider myself a liberal, I was holding the position that the government shouldn't be telling people what to wear, right? So
that's a badly phrased.
I know exactly, and I think
that's not what's happening.
That's what
the enemies say.
You changed my mind on this. You changed my mind on this because I was very informed about what this bill does. Basically, what we're saying is that you have a right to wear what you want, but you don't have a right to a government job while you wear what you want, right? Like you have every right as a liberal. I would say that you have every right to wear a KKK costume, and you can't go to jail for it. You shouldn't be fined for it, but you cannot. If you ask something you're like, well, I want to wear this costume and the government owes me this job. No, that's not asking for freedom. That's asking for a privilege. That's asking for something that is not part of your rights, right? So this is not part of
exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah. Secularism has to maintain that line between church and state, religion and state has to be maintained, and symbols are a very powerful element of that.
Yes,
they just really, really are. So, yeah. Thank you.
Ed is saying Ali does not.
Oh my God, Ed! I have to read this. Ed just said, by the way, Ali does not need to work out. He is a godly specimen. You know who would totally disagree with you is my wife and virtually everybody else I've dated, but thank you so much. I feel like we need to meet in person and just, hang out with each other and nobody else.
Right.
Thank you, Ed.
Mike is saying live long and prosper.
Live long and prosper. Everybody, thank you very much for joining it. Today,
Mike is also
we're
saying
recording it on the day that Trump got impeached, so despite the fact that there's all of this stuff going on and everybody's away, we still have quite a few patrons who attend this live stream, which is amazing.
Yeah.
So,
by the way, Mike is also saying he's on your side on this. David. I think most of our patrons are on your side. David, I agree with you on this, David. So,
final question before we let you go: are there secularist books for kids that'll hopefully encourage them on this path in the future? Anything you can recommend? We can put links in the description.
I have no ideas, unfortunately. But there should be something for schools. That's the Quebec government should do something for schools, actually.
Richard Dawkins recently just put out a book called Outgrowing God that is amazing.
Wait, let me tell you. I'll answer your question.
But you're talking about atheism, where secularism and atheism are related, but of course they're not the same.
They're not the same thing. Yeah.
Wait, hold on. Sorry. I'll get back to you on that, Matt. I have a recommendation. I have a huge list. I want to go through it. Actually, let's have an episode on that, Ali. Let's have education, secularism, and atheism for children.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll have an
actually,
episode.
You know what? I am about to reach out to somebody who specializes in raising secular kids, so we can actually probably talk about it in that episode.
Because I have a big list.
We're gonna let you go, David. We know it's late. It's past your bedtime.
Yeah, sorry.
We don't want to keep you too long. We're on the Eastern time here. There are some questions about Armin, your workout routine, and all of that stuff, and we're going to. I want to announce that on Christmas Eve, actually, we have a live stream because Armin and I have nothing else to do, and that's also the eve of Armin's birthday, where we're gonna do.
Okay.
Should we not do that?
No, let's do that.
Okay. We're going to do that. It's not going to be very, very long, but we're going to just shoot the shit. We're going to talk about everything that we don't necessarily talk about here. It'll be a full Ask Us Anything. It's the last podcast of the year, so we're going to have a blast and we're going to enjoy ourselves.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
So, so just let's we'll let you know. Just stay tuned and we'll let you know. David, I'm going to put up links for all the stuff in the podcast in the description. If you can tell us, just for the listening audience, how people can find you if they want to contact you and learn more about this. Any website?
Our website is atheology.ca.
Atheology.ca?
Atheology.ca, yeah.
Okay.
And if people want to follow you on Twitter or something?
Is it all on your website?
It's on my web. Well, my Twitter handle is RAND_David. My last name _David.
Okay. Cool.
And we have Twitter accounts for the association as well, but you can find those on the website.
Fantastic.
Okay,
guys, that was good.
Fantastic.
Thank you, everybody in the live chat.
Thank you very much. We're going to see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Dave.
The secular jihadists have been made possible thanks to the Illuminati and the covert support of Israel and the CIA. That's what we have been told, but we haven't received our checks yet. If you like what we do, please support us. Share the podcast with your friends. Write and tweet us with topic and guest suggestions. Or head over to secularjihadist.com and give $1 or more for exclusive access to live video. Have your questions read and answered on the air, and more. Till next time, may the flying spaghetti monster be with you.